I see a red light. Is it already on?
It's already on.
Judas Priest, don't we get a
Only when
clapper?
you're doing, you know what the clapper is for.
I do know what the clapper's for. Clapper was for to make a sound mark on the thing. God,
Because
we're getting old.
because
So they knew when to start. So
Hi.
American tank doctrine during the Second World War was such a departure from what we have now. Understanding that America was very late getting into armored warfare. I mean, going back to when tanks were introduced in World War I by the Brits, the Mark I.
yes,
You were in one.
yeah, the Mark I, and actually it was considered part of the Her Royal Majesty's Navy
Land ships.
land ships, and the reason is because it was outfitted with naval guns.
Which makes perfect sense.
But
Did they wear the hats with the big foof on it?
they didn't have enough room in those tanks.
Apparently they weren't like buying into the whole Navy thing.
No.
So the U.S. gets into World War I, 1918, and it takes us like months to gear up to actually send troops over there. And when we finally get there, so we didn't actually deploy.
Okay, well, hold on though. Let me before you get into that. There are interesting side story. Interesting side story
Sidebar.
there. So, one of my favorite stories about World War One, the war to end all wars, they said. That didn't work out.
I don't know if you caught the eye roll or not. Was it subtle or what? Because
So the problem was that the British and the Germans were at a standoff.
and French don't get the Frenchies.
Well, they weren't involved in this particular skirmish.
All right.
The Germans were holed up
Brouhaha.
in this forest, quite some ways off.
Which forest?
I don't recall. I can look it up.
Was it in Europe?
Yes.
Oh, that one.
That
with,
one.
with the trees.
That's it.
Okay.
The Americans show up. The American Marines show up, and they are armed with what?
1903 Springfield.
1903 Springfield, and it was chambered for what round?
30-06 bolt action.
30
round magazine.
06. It was the biggest rifle cartridge of the time.
Sidebar.
Yeah.
50 caliber. The 50 caliber BMG is a scaled up 30-06. They took a 30-06 and said, let's just make this bigger. 50 caliber. There it is.
Okay. So the U.S. Marines show up. They've got their
03 Springfield.
chambered in,
30-06.
and
We've covered this,
yeah.
Okay.
I just like hearing it.
All right. Okay.
And so they say to the British, what's the problem? Well, you see, there's these German Japs off in the woods there, and we can't get to them. So you keep talking about how great you are. Why don't you take care of it?
And what do the Americans say? Hold my beer.
The Marines, they look out there. It's probably 400 or 500 yards more, maybe. And they're like, yeah, we got this. They had been trained in marksmanship from the ground up. And when they got there, they started picking off the Germans at such a range that no other army could match them.
Sidebar.
Yep.
The United States Marine, no matter what you are, whether you're a pilot, whether you're a tanker, whether you're a cook, whether you are a steward, first and foremost, you are a rifleman. That's how it starts for all Marines. You learn how to shoot.
They were such good marksmen that the Germans lodged a complaint saying that the Americans were not fighting fair.
Who do they complain to?
I love that story.
Is there like a complaint department for the war? I mean, there was like an arbiter or something. But interesting note also on that is that and I'm going to mispronounce this horribly, so my apologies to any Marines that are out there. The term devil dog originated with the Marines during World War I, because the Germans referred to the American Marines as, here's that mispronunciation I was going to tell you about, Puffelhund, which is devil dog. And
Teufel.
I'm mispronouncing it. I know I am, but
Well, we know the hound at least.
you're gonna take care of that in post. Put something down at the bottom, like right here. That'll show the proper pronunciation.
There you go.
Anyways, tanks.
Back to tanks. Let's
talk
go to
about
World War
tanks.
II because
I'm going to lay real quick groundwork about the Americans and how we got there. We started off, we didn't even have our own tanks. We borrowed tanks from the French. The Renault 17, which was innovative because it was the first tank that actually had a rotating turret. And it was about that big. compared to the British tanks, which were massive. But they were mobile, and they had this gun that you could aim at. Interwar years, people aren't putting a lot of money into defense except for the Germans. So, and also they had the proving ground of the Spanish Civil War, where they tested a lot of their tactics and a lot of their weapons. So the Americans are developing tanks, but our heart's not in it. We developed, such war winners as the M3 Stuart and the Grant, or the British called it the Lee, or vice versa, one of those two. And then we came out with the M4 Sherman, which at the time of its introduction was a war winner. The Sherman tank was not designed to engage other tanks. It was designed as an infantry support vehicle. It was designed to make breakthroughs, bust bunkers.
Okay, so what was supposed to happen then when the American army came up against German tanks?
You had tank destroyers.
Like
M10 motor gun carriage with a 3-inch cannon, which was a decent tank destroyer with that big 3-inch gun.
That was the Jackson, right?
That was I believe it was called the Jackson.
Because the Hellcat came later.
Right. Hellcat was awesome, but we're jumping ahead. So the Sherman tank wasn't designed for this. So as part of every tank platoon, you were supposed to have tank destroyers that the Americans would run into other tanks, and they would slip their Shermans into reverse, back up, and go, y'all go take care of that. My father told an interesting story. His unit had come across a German bunker, and they called for tank support. So tankers showed up in their M4 Shermans, and the guys, got his binoculars. Imagine these are binoculars. Got his binoculars out there, and they're looking forward up ahead, and he says, well, we can go ahead and support you, but y'all got to go up there and take out that bunker. And my dad does, one of these. And he, no lie, he actually walked up to the tank, knocked on the armor while looking at the guy, and then grabbed his shirt and went. The tankers were afraid of getting holes shot in their tanks, which happened quite often. But as the Sherman matured, as it started going through the war, finally they got rid of that ridiculous short-barreled 75 millimeter, which was designed for busting bunkers, and finally upgunned it. But it was so late in the war when they started doing that, and the Germans are like, yeah, that's cute. Have you seen our Panther?
Which had a high velocity 75, didn't it?
The shell would actually rise. Sherman's lobbed shells, Panther's shells would go because they were going so fast.
And the Germans had actually developed the whole idea of the sloped armor. Now, the Sherman did have frontal armor that was sloped, but up against a high velocity 75, forget about it.
Well, it was also, you look at the you may put pictures up, I'm not sure, but you look at the angle of the slope on a T-34 Russian tank or the Panther, comparing that to the angle of slope on an M4 Sherman. And it's like, okay, it's a good concept, take it a little bit further. But what was the fatal flaw of all German tanks?
Hitler.
The other fatal flaw of all German tanks.
They were over-engineered.
Over-engineered.
Yeah.
I saw a special once on the Panther tank, and the guy's showing me the bogey wheel assembly, and he says, honestly, it's a work of art. It's beautiful, but it's so labor-intensive to build that you could have come up with something quicker and easier to build. The Tiger tank, much feared, everywhere. They only built 1,300 of them. And there's only one left. If the Germans had stuck with the Panzer IV?
Oh, it was magnificent. Yeah.
Had they stuck with that, just improved that, because you look at it at its evolution during the war. Went from this short-barreled 50 millimeter up to a 75 millimeter gun. And it was a good, robust tank. But Hitler and the hierarchy always wanted the latest, greatest, and best. The Panzer IV could not stand up to a T-34.
Right.
So when they had their little misadventure in Russia, and they're running across this world beater tank by these peasants who can't build anything, it was quite a surprise.
And tear it down when they take old Berlin. They're gonna